Hey everyone, welcome to the Odinic School of Mysteries. My name is Bear. Thank you for coming. I was told that this headset has better sound quality by a very reliable source. So I'm going to try using this for a few videos. And we'll see how it does. Does that sound good? Good. Excellent. So this is a set of videos I've been wanting to do for a while. Lily, go away. Go away. Sorry, it's the dog. This is a set of videos I've been wanting to do for a while. And this is a set of videos that are particularly close to my heart. I started with shamanism. Shamanism is how I began my journey. And I owe everything to shamanism. I still practice the way of life today. I still do this on a regular basis. And I figured it was high time that we got started talking about this. And there was a couple of things that happened that kind of it didn't even really, weirdly enough, it didn't even really occur to me to make a series about this until two things happened at once. Two people, or like two or three people, emailed me and or left a comment about the underworld, death, and reincarnation, which lined up shamanism perfectly. I couldn't have asked for a better segue into shamanism. And then a friend of mine, Angelua, sent me an email also asking about shamanism and the shamanic journey and otherworld, and some of the laws and hazards that exist while doing a shamanic journey. She also, actually, Angelua, she has a Facebook ministry that she does. If you're interested, I'll leave it's kind of a shout out to her. I'll leave a link down below so you could go and check her out. It's really good. I've watched a few of them. They're little short, like little 5-minute deals. It's good stuff. So, what is shamanism? The word shaman actually was coined fairly recently. There wasn't really a good word for it. I forget the guy who really popularized the term, but the word shaman actually comes from the Tungus tribe in Siberia, and it translates to one who sees in the dark, essentially. You could, if you've been with my channel long enough, you could already see the esoteric meaning behind that, one who sees in the dark. It's pretty clear about what that means. It's the thing with shamanism, and I don't want to use this word, but I'm going to use it because I'm going to use this word because people use this word, not because I particularly like it. But the quote-unquote primitive religions. Shamanism is the religion of the primitive people. Again, I hate that word. I don't like it, but I'm sort of forced into it. So we're talking about like the Aborigines. We're talking about like the Native Americans, the Inuit, the bush peoples of South America, the bush peoples of Africa. These types of people, their worldview could basically be summed up, and this isn't, I know someone out there is going to disagree with this assessment, and that's fine, and I know it's not perfect, but essentially their religion, their worldview could be kind of summed up as shamanic, an earth-based religion. And what is interesting about these, so how to segue? Whenever a religion starts, let's do it this way. Let's talk about it this way. Whenever a religion starts in its primitive forms, it is always designed to set somebody free. It's always designed to get you out of the underworld, to set you free, to make it so that you could live again, so that you could escape your body and live in paradise, for example. But as time goes on, we see over and over again, particularly in Western religious institutions, that they start off really good, but as time goes on, and as they become an established religion, rather than a faith or a worldview, as they become an established religion, you see the emergence of a priest class. And once you get the priest class set up, then it becomes almost always as time wears on, the principal doctrines start to disappear. The sacred knowledge starts to disappear. And what you get instead is a way to buy yourself into heaven. So we see, like in ancient Egypt, for example, in the very early on, when it was still primitive, when the religion was still primitive, there's only like a small set of gods. And the way you got to heaven was very basic. Don't be a dick, right? Do what's necessary, and you could leave. The whole point of the religion was to learn your lessons, don't be a dick, and you get to go. As we move on in time, we see the advent, like in and around the Middle Kingdom or so, maybe a little bit later, of like the Amun priesthood. We see which was a very corrupt organization. We see the emergence of Shakti dolls, which are these little dolls you purchase for a very high price that allows you to buy yourself through the Duat, through the underworld, and basically allows you to buy yourself into heaven. I just finished yesterday the Egyptian Book of the Dead. It's the Papyrus of Ani. Ani's. There's a bunch of books of the dead. I just finished Ani's. I don't know if you can see it back here. It's this one. It's really fascinating stuff. But these were originally mystery school documents. They're originally meant to hold sacred, secret knowledge, and they're all written in symbols. But as time goes on, everyone forgot all of those, and the books of the dead became a way to purchase your way into heaven. You can, especially at the Late Kingdom, you're able to just go to the priest and pick and choose which chapters you want in your personal Book of the Dead, and they'll just write your name in. And so that way, if you were rich and you could afford all the chapters, you get to go all the way through the underworld without any problems and emerge on the other side. But if you're poor, well, either you couldn't afford a Book of the Dead because they were expensive, or you're just out of luck. You could just buy 1 or 2 chapters. I was watching a program the other night on it, and they were saying that the average cost of a Book of the Dead was half a year's salary. So, if you make $40,000 a year, as a U.S. person living today, that's $20,000, right? And it's expensive. It's expensive. We see the same thing happen in Greece. Greece is, I don't know, but we see it all over. Like with the advent of Christianity is another good example. I'm going to try and speed this up. I'm lagging behind. Anyway. Christianity, the same thing. When Christianity first started, it was a way to set you free. Do these things, you'll get to go to heaven. Right? Understand these truths. If you understand these things, you follow this particular doctrine, you get to go to heaven. It's easy peasy. Right? We're going to set you free. As Christianity progresses, the ancient secret teachings of Christianity either disappear entirely and are only held by a few people, and then the religion, then the faith portion of it, the doctrine gets replaced by a religion which becomes all about profit motive. how do we get people to pay us? So we got, I can't remember what they're called. I feel like they're called indulgences. Probably wrong on that. But the Catholic Church, you could, if you give them money, they'll give you a little slip of paper that says X amount of sins have been forgiven. Hail Marys. There's always these, not Hail Marys. I don't even know what I'm thinking. But there's always these get out of jail cards that are required in order for you to get to heaven. Tithing and all this stuff that was not necessarily a part of the old religions, but have become a staple of the modern ones in order to generate revenue. You don't even have to be a very serious scholar to see this pattern happen over and over and over again. But all of that spiel to say, with the primitive peoples, right? I'm air quoting this again because that's not a good way of thinking about them at all. We find that these people, they have no concept of money. They're just hunter-gatherers. They're just the people who live under the stars. Their tales, their myths were incredibly sacrosanct. You weren't allowed to alter them. So their myths were held intact for thousands of years. So I grew up in the country. And one of the things that we notice in the country quite a bit is that it is rather common for the city folk to poo-poo the country folk, right? They're primitive, they're uneducated, they don't know what they're talking about, that sort of thing. But what we kind of see this with the religions, right? The Western city folk religions, Egyptian, Greek, Rome, these things really poo-poo the old guard, the country folk, the people who live out in the hills. But this is all leading to something. Okay. So they poo-poo the religion of the people out in the hills without realizing in all likelihood that the religion of the people in the hills is closer to the original than any of the urban religions. The urban religious centers tended to change and morph depending on political sensibilities, depending on the government, depending on whether the priests were greedy or not and decided that they needed to make money. These things are rather, they're very changeable in the way that they do things. But the primitive people, again, I hate the word, but the people of the hills, they didn't do that. And what is interesting with shamanism and these old country folk religions, the old hill people religions, is that these people had no means of sailing. They didn't have airplanes. They didn't have boats that would traverse the oceans. Yet, in almost every case, the religion, even though some of the myths and stuff, even though the stories are slightly different, even though some of the culture is slightly different, the actual mechanics of the way the shamanic world works, the shamanic worldview works, is almost identical, with some very minor philosophical differences. The mechanics of the way the shaman will go about his work in Aboriginal Australia will be very similar to the way the medicine man in North America will go about his. And if you study enough of these worldviews, you realize pretty quickly that I don't even, how do you even put it? it's weird. It's weird that it hasn't changed much. So clearly they're operating from a base doctrine. There's something that is commonly understood with these people that we have completely lost in our Western way of looking at it. So now we come to heathenism. We come to the Norse Mysteries. And what is very unique and exceptional about the Norse Mysteries is that the imagery in Norse Mysteries is incredibly emblematic of the shamanic worldview. It's incredibly emblematic of the shamanic worldview. The god Odin, and I'm not the only one who's noticed this, by the way, and I've read in about 4 or 5 different sources. I'll try and, if I have time, I'll add them here, just so you don't think I'm crazy. But if I don't have time, I'll add them later, I guess. I don't know. I'm not the only one who's saying this, that Odin is like the proto-shaman. He is like the most of his imagery and the stuff that comes along with him is very much indicative of the kinds of things shamans do to either travel through the spirit world or induce altered states of consciousness. I know it sounds really bizarre, but it's a thing. And so we look at Sleipnir, his horse with 8 legs that travels up and down the world tree. But that allows him to travel up and down the world tree through all the different phases of all the 9 worlds of the Norse mystery school system. Using self-sacrifice, particularly pain. I'm not advocating for this, of course, but there's a lot of cultures that use pain as a way to achieve hallucinogenic states of consciousness, to achieve altered states of consciousness. The use of hallucinogenic plants and mushrooms is very widespread and well known in academia throughout. That we know that the Icelandic peoples were using these on a regular basis. Very common for shamanic peoples. The imagery is there. And so the thing that I find fascinating about the Norse is that it straddles very perfectly the primitive worldview, again, the primitive worldview, and the traditional Western urban center worldview, where in the traditional Western centers of things, big elaborate temples, big elaborate stone churches, everything is gold, everything is made out of things that are gonna like make you look pretty, and things were meant to last, right? Although I don't think anyone would ever make the claim that the Vikings didn't like stuff. They were very the truth is the Norse were very materialistic. You know, they liked their bling, they liked fancy helmets and golden goblets and that sort of thing. But what is unique about the religious side of things is we don't see giant churches. There is a couple of temples we have found, but there isn't many. And the giant temples that are there are made out of wood. They're not made out of stone, and they weren't meant to be permanent, right? They like all the Norse stuff, it all rots away. We only find this stuff because mostly by accident, you know, or we already kind of know what we're looking for. But what we do see is personalized religious items. We see bracelets, we see necklaces, we see rings, we see horns, we see things that are individualistic to the person rather than a huge mass complex of stone that's designed to last forever. and that is very much in keeping with the hill people way of viewing the spirit. Your earthly life is not the most important part. Right? Your earthly life is not the most important part. It is understood in the shamanic worldview that your earthly life is just a very small, short, fleeting time, and all the important stuff happens somewhere else. And the better you are at going to all the somewhere else parts, the better off you be. And so the stuff you wear personally is to aid in that way of thinking. So we find in early Egypt, for example, everything from doorknobs to silverware to the things people were wearing, everything had esoteric significance. Everything you did had a spiritual significance. We find the same sorts of things in Native American cultures, in the Mayan culture, in the Scandinavian culture, where everything you wore, everything you did, had a spiritual and esoteric significance to it. Okay, I'm already at 21 minutes. So, this is just part one. There's going to be a lot of these. I haven't decided if I'm going to do this all consecutively yet, or if I'm going to just do like part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, part 5, just boom, 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 boom. Or if I'm going to spread them out a little bit. I'm probably going to spread these out a little bit because I really want to get into symbol reading and astrotheology in the near future. But we'll see how it goes. But that's kind of a poor man's introduction, I guess you could say. Next time, part 2, we're going to get into more of the nitty-gritty about what the actual worldview is of shamanism and the shamanic journey, which is achieving altered states of consciousness, and some of the rules that exist in the spirit world. And depending on how that goes, maybe there'll be more than one video. We'll see. So I know this video seems incomplete. Again, there's going to be a lot more of these. They're going to be a lot more specific, a lot more honed in. This is just more of a, if this is a 101 class, this is the opening. This is the first day. All right. So, as always, if you have any questions, leave a comment. Or if you want to, you can always shoot me an email. I like comments quite a bit because it tells YouTube that this channel is worth viewing. So if you leave a comment, that'd be fantastic. Of course, like it, share it around. The more ways you interact with the video, the more it tells YouTube that we should show it to other people. Okay, well, I look forward to seeing you soon. The next one, like I said, will be a lot more specific, and we'll get into a lot more of the specifics of what shamanism is, instead of just the, preamble. All right, sound good? I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.